Hi, I'm your host, Rowan Tonkin, and welcome to Being Planful, the show for FP&A leaders and planning experts. Welcome everyone, I'm your host, Rowan Tonkin, and welcome back to Being Planful. As you know, we've been recapping some of our great sessions from the Planful Virtual Tour, and today is no different. I'm really pleased to be introducing you to Kevin Zell, Strategic Finance Manager at Carta, along with Brian Martell, Product Marketing Director here at Planful. Really looking forward to this session. Without further ado, over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rowan and Annette, and thank you all for joining our fireside chat today. Sorry we couldn't bring you live fire, but we are going to bring you a great conversation instead, so we hope you all enjoy. I'm excited to welcome our guest, Kevin Zell from Carta. Carta is a high-growth technology company out of San Francisco. They help companies manage their equity plans and cap tables, and Kevin leads their strategic finance team. So Carta is in a state of very high growth. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on at the company, and so we're really excited to hear about that growth from Kevin and to hear about how the Planful platform has helped support and facilitate that growth for him and his strategic finance team. So with that, I'd love to kick it over to Kevin to say hello and tell us a little bit about Carta, a little bit about yourself, and a little bit about your journey.
Thanks, Brian. Super happy to be here. Appreciate the quick intro. I can give a little more color. I joined Carta about 2.5 years ago to lead our strategic finance team, and we were about 300 employees at the time. We're up to almost 1,000 today, so I've been through quite a bit of growth over the last 2.5 years, and happy to kind of talk through how Planful's helped us manage that growth, as well as kind of transition out of traditional FP&A and spreadsheets and into a more kind of dynamic planning and connected universe across both finance and kind of other groups within our company. Prior to Carta, I did investment banking for a few years and have been really excited to kind of work with such a high growth company, and excited to talk with you all today.
Awesome. Well, hey, I'd love for you to start and just by telling us a little bit more about Carta, a little bit about the state of the union, if you will, when you first got there, and in sort of this high growth environment that you entered when you joined the team, and sort of what life was like, and what was the impetus really for the change you were looking for when you started evaluating FP&A software tools like Planful.
Sure. So when I joined, it was a very lean team. I reported directly to our CFO, and we were kind of just starting to build out what your traditional FP&A function might look like, doing our first kind of annual planning cycle, putting together a lot of our board reporting and kind of standard monthly and quarterly metrics reporting, those types of things. And it was all being built in spreadsheets, using a variety of different kind of disaggregated data sets and a number of kind of different tools that didn't always work well together. So we kind of stayed in that state over the next 1.5 years and continued to iterate on those processes and make them better, but they remained in spreadsheets. And as their team started to grow in the middle of 2019, we added a couple of analysts on our team, and it became very apparent that it was just not feasible to continue to do this in spreadsheets. So we began looking for a tool and kind of looked at all the players in the space that you might think of. Planful really stood out to us for a couple of reasons. The biggest is just that it's so Excel-like. We all have an investment banking background on our team and grew up in spreadsheets, so getting out of them would be a bit of a shock to us. So Planful allowed us to kind of merge both an online cloud type platform with a lot of the native Excel functionality that we were really used to. So that was a huge plus for us. Additionally, reporting became very important. We are growing so fast that getting metrics and data in front of our execs as quickly as possible is really the core job of my team. And having a tool where it was a really intuitive reporting system and allowing people to kind of come in and drag and drop and build their own reports really allowed us to get to value quickly. And so those are the two main factors that kind of helped Planful win in our buying decision. And as well as just, we were really impressed with kind of the overall customer support and sales process compared to some of the competitors.
That's great. It's great to hear. So let me ask you this, because I know you guys have had a lot going on over there. You've expanded business lines and product lines, and I know your team plays a really instrumental role as sort of strategic advisor to those teams. Tell us a little bit about what that dynamic is like between your team I believe you called it the Trifecta. So maybe you can share with us what is the Trifecta and what that relationship is like with your team, and how you thought about that relationship in your evaluation of an FP&A software platform. What was important to you to make sure that you were, building a solution that would really support those relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. It's actually another really good point that I missed during the quick intro on why we picked Planful. In my 2.5 years at Carta, we've reorged twice. So when I joined, we were in a business unit type organization structure that was split by kind of product line that we were servicing. About a year into my time at Carta, we transitioned into more of a traditional function-based org where eng and product are separate from delivery and sales, et cetera. And about 9 months ago, we made the switch back to this more of a BU structure. And these kind of constant business evolutions was a huge plus for Planful as well. We can now make these kind of changes on a much quicker basis and kind of interact with the data in a much more dynamic way. But to your point about the trifectas, the way we build our business model in kind of business units is we believe that every business that we're going into needs a kind of business lead, an engineering lead, and a product lead. They essentially control the full P&L for that business. And so it's really my team's job to serve as a CFO for each of those mini business units and help them evaluate business decisions and kind of make trade-offs. So Planful really allowed us to do this by kind of getting them in the weeds. And we actually rolled out budgets for the first time yesterday, and we've really received great feedback on kind of what it's like to interact with Planful. They can now go into a tool and see things and ask questions in real time versus asking one of us to kind of pull a spreadsheet together for them, maybe interact in Google Sheets for a little while. It's just a much simpler, kind of cleaner way to interact. And our execs are really feeling more empowered that they can kind of in real time go in and see how their business unit's performing and then get on a call with us and have us help them think through scenarios and what it might look like if they invest $1 here versus $1 there, et cetera. So it's been really helpful in this business unit model and really helps my team spend less time putting together reports and more time actually doing the fun part of our job, which is being advisors and helping the execs of each of our businesses kind of think through how they want to run their business.
Oh, that's fantastic. I first of all, congratulations on the go live, and I'd love to come back to that in just a second. But before we go there, I think one of the really exciting things about your particular success story is that you guys were able to get up and running on the Planful platform in just 6 weeks. And this has been a big theme of the virtual tour the last few days. In this particular business environment, in this landscape, we have so many customers and prospects kind of coming to us and saying, I need solutions to these use cases, to these business challenges now. I need to get up and running quickly, which is, was really the catalyst behind our Planful Now initiative. So I'd love for you to share, maybe with those folks out in the audience who are just beginning their evaluation of these kind of tools, what was your approach to be able to get live in 6 weeks so quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also another big factor that played into our decision making throughout the kind of RFP process, looking at the different providers, meeting with both their internal and kind of third-party consultant teams that helped with implementation. It became clear that Planful would kind of get us time to value as fast as possible. Some of the other platforms have quite a steep learning curve, and so we were really happy to learn that Planful was pretty easy and a lot of drag and drop type functionality. But what we ultimately ended up doing is working with our partner Keen Vision to kind of lay out a roadmap on how we can slowly roll out things on kind of a weekly basis that allow us to get time to value without trying to tackle all of it at once. So we started with reporting. It was kind of the low-hanging fruit. As soon as we got our ERP NetSuite connected and kind of reconciling, which took only about a week, we were able to start building reports and kind of taking a lot of the standard P&L and balance sheet and those types of reports that we had in Excel and have them real time in Planful. And so that alone cut about 10 hours out of our monthly close process, just simply not having to download data out of NetSuite, manipulate it, put it back into another format. So within the first few weeks of our implementation, we were already seeing value, which was really nice. And it was definitely encouraging because instead of waiting longer and longer for the kind of big aha go live moment, we had these kind of each week something new that we could announce as kind of being live. And so we started with the reporting, and then we moved into actually recreating our big model in Planful. So we kind of took a tab by tab approach essentially and started with the low hanging fruit, really simple templates, and just continued to build up over time. And Team Vision kind of did a teach versus build type environment with us where they would show us pieces of it. Then we would go and try to replicate it in another part of the model. And so like I said, we released budgets 2 days ago, but we're close to having kind of our full operating model living in Planful, which is a huge kind of accomplishment. And we're super excited to be able to start using it in there in real time.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fantastic. And again, congratulations on your success. And I think a really great point you made. Well, you made a lot of them, but one of the really good ones you made in there was that, you celebrated the quick wins along the way. And I think, we see that from so many of our customers. It's such an important part of the vision for how you roll out a tool like this, is to not only do what Kevin's suggesting, which is kind of to take it in small pieces, but celebrate those quick wins, not only within your own team, but kind of across your company, because it really helps the whole company understand the impact and the ROI you're getting on this transformation. So I don't know, Kevin, would you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of nice. We have a weekly kind of stand-up meeting with our CFO at the beginning of each week, and it was nice to kind of preview a new feature that we'd been working on over the last week. It gave him a way to see that we were making progress, and kind of allowed us to feel like we were accomplishing things kind of one step at a time. And now it was also a great way to just learn the platform, because we kind of started with the lowest complexity and are moving now into much more kind of complex, multi-dimensional type planning things that took a little longer to learn.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue. I'd love to learn a little bit more about, what is next, and what are some of the, the business processes or the use cases your team is going to tackle next, and again, what's sort of the vision and the approach there?
Yeah, absolutely. So step one was really for us to be able to connect NetSuite actuals with our plan data that lived in Excel prior to this. That step is basically complete, which has been a huge win, because it just allows us to kind of track budgets in real time on a monthly basis, show each exec how they're kind of above or below budget, where they might need to make changes. But the next step is really to allow a lot more scenario modeling. Historically, we've done this for them, but it's been kind of a series of meetings. They'll have kind of a kickoff meeting, ask us to evaluate some decision they're thinking about making. We'll go back to our desk, do some work. A couple days later, schedule a follow-up meeting, kind of walk them through our analysis. There tends to be iterations. It was just kind of something that could have been done very quickly, would end up taking close to a week. And so our next step is really allowing them to have templates that they can play with. And so on the business side, for example, giving our executives the ability to play with what changing quota might look like in real time, and having them see how that flows through the business. It just empowers them a lot more to make decisions, and we can pull up a dashboard or one of these reports in a meeting and kind of work on it together. And instead of it being this complex spreadsheet that they may not be as familiar with, they can kind of drag and drop or just change a few inputs to really see how decisions might impact the whole business. So that's really what we're looking for next. And then from there, I think it'll just be continuing to build out more advanced reporting. There's a lot of underlying data that we have that the finance team looks at on a much more regular basis, but it hasn't been distributed as widely to our business partners. And so I think once we get the dynamic planning set up, the next piece is really taking a stab at building dashboards and really getting a suite of kind of metrics reporting that updates in pretty real time. A variety of stakeholders, whether it's our people team or our CEO, can log in and see kind of different updates on where the business is.
Yeah, Kevin, I think it's such a great point, and it's something, those are conversations, or a similar conversation with so many customers now, which is, expanding the use of the platform kind of outside of the Office of Finance and across the business, and getting those non-finance users involved in the process, which it sounds like you guys certainly have a vision laid out of how you're going to go about that at Carta. I'm curious, what does that mean to you and to your team, as finance professionals, breaking down those barriers and creating those connections and that collaboration? What does that mean for you guys in sort of your professional brand, really, if you will?
Yeah, it's been great so far, and I think it'll continue to improve. It allows us to do what I think is the fun part of FP&A, the analysis part at the end, not the kind of spreadsheet reporting and building these massive data sets. So it allows us to be in a much more strategic type setting with these teams, and it honestly is what allows us to transition from a traditional FP&A team to more of a strategic finance team, where we can actually be in the room thinking through business decisions with them, and they view us as much more of a business partner rather than just somebody who's kind of telling them they're over or under budget or need to change their hiring plan here or there. They come to us as advisors, and it's been a lot of fun to kind of continue to grow in my career through this. And I see the analysts that report to me really starting to enjoy kind of the relationships, allowing them to build throughout the organization. And then I guess one thing I didn't add earlier that I should add is just how simple it was to roll this out to our execs. We gave them all access, and we're planning on scheduling a bunch of training sessions next week. And 2 of them actually wrote back that they logged in, and it was self-explanatory enough that they didn't need to spend the hour with us to learn how to use it. So it's pretty amazing how fast everybody's able to get up to speed. And thankfully, a lot of our execs have somewhat of a financial background, given that we're in a financial services business. But in general, I think that the overall ability for them to interact quickly and gain value from this has been really impressive.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And actually, I'd love to probe on that point. And I'm wondering if you have any best practices for the audience out there, particularly around, C-level executive audience, high standards, high expectations, typically, right, with that particular audience. Any best practices you have in terms of how to roll out that training program, that awareness program, or that onboarding effort to really get those C-level executives engaged in a more meaningful way?
Yeah, I think I would do it very similar to how I said we rolled out Planful to begin with. So we started with just some very basic reports, really high level summary budgets and kind of budget versus actual reporting for them. And so that just got them familiar with kind of what the system looks like. It got them to log in. And the real way we're forcing this is by just not doing it in spreadsheets anymore. So we're kind of disconnecting the Google Docs that we used to use for these things and really driving them to Planful anytime they have a question. So it's driving adoption faster than we thought. And then from here, it's really continuing to add complexity over time. I think when we actually get to the scenario modeling type stuff, we'll need to meet with them so they can understand where to make changes and how it might impact things. But from just a pure reporting standpoint, they've already figured out some ways to kind of build their own reports, look at things slightly differently. And frankly, it's actually driven a lot of really good questions. It's allowing us to spend more time kind of reviewing the numbers and less time just preparing them. And so even through this implementation process, it created a better relationship between our finance and accounting teams on kind of where things are mapped in our billing system, where things are mapped in our accounting system, and really kind of allowed us to spend more time making sure everything made sense from a business standpoint, less time preparing it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it triggered another question in my mind, which was, a lot of times when we talk about these sort of digital transformation efforts, you hear people say, people, process, and technology is sort of the 3 legs of the stool, which is absolutely true, by the way. So I guess here's my question is, did you and your team take any time as you kind of embarked on this journey to re-engineer any of your processes kind of before you got started to kind of introduce some new best practices?
I don't know if we did as much before we got started, but it's certainly happening throughout the implementation process. There's been a number of times we get on calls with Keen Vision to talk about building out a tab in our model, and something that was super complex in Excel due to needing kind of 3-dimensionality becomes way more simple in Planful. So it really allows us to minimize the amount of human error, kind of formula error that could exist by having these tabs in a spreadsheet with massive amounts of formulas. Something as simple as rent allocation, I think, is an example I was using with you earlier. It should be a relatively simple equation, looking at kind of how much a desk costs by location and adding that to each employee in that location. But in Excel, it's a much bigger kind of 3-dimensional piece, because we need to look at where people are from a BU and a kind of functional standpoint. And so it just was very complex. And that spreadsheet is now like a 6-row template in Planful. So much simpler from that standpoint. And then in terms of other processes, it really sped up our close process with our accounting team. So they would typically close the books kind of day 7 post month end. And it would take my team a few days to really get everything matching up and aligned to what our plan looked like so we could do BVAs. And once we get to a budget versus actual kind of analysis, we tend to find things that might be categorized wrong or needed to be changed in our accounting system. And so this just sped that process up a lot faster, because now as changes happen in NetSuite, they're reflected in Planful in real time. And we can kind of on a weekly or daily basis even look and see if things are being miscategorized or if we need to move anything around. So it's just created a lot more alignment, I would say, between the finance and accounting teams, and allowed us to spend a ton more time kind of doing more analytical type work than just getting spreadsheets built out.
Sure. And you know, Kevin, what's interesting about your story, your particular story, is you guys were sort of in the midst of implementation, kind of right in the middle of COVID, right? Fair enough. What kind of thoughts or takeaways or just sort of observations do you have in terms of kind of going through this experience in the midst of all of that, and sort of any new perspectives on how important these tools are kind of in the face of, you know, the world was dynamic enough before COVID, but now it's even crazier. Any perspectives on Planful and how these tools can help?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we will have seen it as much as some other companies. Carta's already spread out across kind of 8 offices, and our finance team's all in San Francisco, but we have partners in our accounting team across other offices, and our execs are spread out. So we're pretty used to working remote. The one thing that this is certainly helping with is something like version control. Having 3 analysts on my team, kind of all working in models at the same time, has led to a number of issues in the past, where we're catching things last minute that don't quite reconcile, and just creating kind of a lot of headache. And so this allows us to be working on different parts of the model at the same time, which is a huge benefit. I can ask somebody on my team to go tweak something on a sales build for one of our business units while I'm working on something from a headcount standpoint in another business unit, which historically wouldn't have really been possible because it was a shared Excel file. Now we can be working at the same time. So I think 1, it's sped up our ability to work together, and 2, it's kind of created much better version controls and allowing us to see things in more real time. And I guess in addition to that, I think the scenarios within Planful just make things a lot better. I think our current version of our 2020 budget is on like V175 or something, so in Excel. And so having this type of history and kind of being able to run different scenarios in Planful is going to help that tremendously. We always at the end of each quarter have to go back and try to figure out which version ties to which set of board slides. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of our next board meeting, where a lot of the reporting will come out of Planful, and we'll avoid a lot of the headache of trying to reconcile across multiple versions of files.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So I guess with a few minutes left, Kevin, I'd love, if you have any thoughts for, again, the audience members out there who might just be thinking about beginning this continuous planning journey and evaluating these software tools. I know you've of course shared a ton of great tips for us here so far throughout the session, but any kind of final thoughts you might have for those folks in terms of best practices, how to prioritize, how to think about the value and the impact that you've been able to get out of this tool?
Yeah, I think a few things come to mind at first. The first is what we talked about a little bit earlier, just trying to get time to value as quickly as possible, breaking things up into much smaller pieces, kind of rolling out things on a more weekly basis. It just makes what seems like a pretty daunting task a lot more manageable, and allows you to start learning the tool. The second point, I think, is there are great resources on Planful's website around training, and Keen Vision also did some training for us. But really, I think what I've advised my team and what helped me the most is just really getting your hands dirty. You can set up kind of sandbox type environments where you can't break anything. And so going in there and messing around and kind of just clicking and learning your way through the platform, I found to be the fastest way to learn. And now I feel like I'm much more comfortable with kind of making changes on my own. And then finally, I think I would just spend extra time up front making sure all your dimensions are kind of laid out properly. I don't want to get into all the details or weeds here, but setting up kind of the basis for the way the 3 dimensions of your type of hierarchy work up front can save you a ton of time. And it's already proven valuable. Yesterday, our CEO decided to kind of change some of our work structure a little bit again, and we consolidated one of our 5 business units into one of the other ones. And so with a drag of a button, essentially, in Planful, I was able to move everything related to that business unit to the new one something that would have taken hours in Excel took me literally 3 minutes. So it's been really awesome. And I think just upfront, taking the time to make sure your data is structured properly will pay huge dividends in the future.
Fantastic. That's great. That's great. Well, hey, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so happy to hear you guys are having such success with the platform. You're getting so much value from it. We certainly look to a very long and prosperous partnership between Carta and Planful. I want to thank you for your time today. I'm sure you're very, very busy these days, like all finance professionals. So thank you for joining and taking the time. Thank you to everybody in the audience as well for taking the time to join us. I hope you all found it valuable. I know I did. So please, everybody, stay safe. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Kevin. Back to you guys.
Great to hear from Kevin and Brian. And I'm really looking forward to the future transformation that Kevin and team are going to be embarking upon with their continuous planning journey at Carta. Make sure you hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for stopping by.